Welcome to the Small Town Pastor Podcast. This is Ben Beckner, and I appreciate you tuning in and listening. If you can notice here, we've got a new logo and some new intro music, and so just want to get your take on that. Playing around with some new things and just trying to give the podcast a little bit different feel. So be interested to hear what you have to think about that. Just a few things that want to share with you this morning as we start this. And I've always said that I'm trying to do this podcast in a way to kind of process ministry, to process what's going on in my life and in this season, and I'm excited to share these things with you, and just want to get your take on some of these things as we work through these. So show notes and different things like that as I'm doing this, trying to figure out some things that I can share with you, things that are still in my heart as I'm working through these things, and just enjoying this time of this season in my life. If you can believe that or not, this COVID's been a strange thing, and the way that it's impacted so much of my life and the life of my family. So a few weeks ago was able to head back down to Monte Vista, and I did a wedding for a student that was in my youth group a few years back. And so it was just a great time to be together, to spend that with him. Kind of a major milestone for him and for me as well. And it was just a great time to be there. Some things that were interesting to me as we prepared for that. We had talked about getting that set up weeks and months in advance, and had intended to go through some different things as far as premarital counseling and stuff. And it just always crazy how life just sneaks up, and all of a sudden the day is here. And it was just kind of an interesting thing for me, trying to get ready for that. It was good to be with them, and we spent some great time together, talking about things, preparing for things, making those major decisions in your life is something that just really pulls some other things into perspective and helps you think through things that you weren't really thinking about before. And so it was just fun to spend that time with them and talk about what these life changes mean and how they're going to navigate those things going forward. So it's great to be a part of their day. And I don't know if they're back from their honeymoon yet or not, but I'm assuming things are good. So it was also good to be back home, so to speak. And kind of an interesting thing this time around as I went back. For a long time, as we would travel back to Monte Vista and where we had lived for such a long time, we just always kind of referred that as home. But I noticed as I was there this time, my heart was a little bit different. I wasn't viewing that as home anymore. Not that it's bad or anything like that, but just my heart had changed a little bit in that whole process of this transition that we've been in over this last year. And so that kind of surprised me a little bit. I wasn't thinking about that or anything, but just in my few days there, spending time with people and doing different things, it was so good to be there and be a part of the celebrations and things happening. But there was just a moment where I realized that this wasn't home anymore, and that I was looking forward to going home, which was where we live now. And I think that that's just a good part of the transition for us as a family, for me in this season of ministry, and what God's doing in my life. It's a funny thing how you leave one place and you move to another, and you're involved in life and things that are happening there. But then realizing life is going on with or without you, wherever you are, or wherever you've left from. And so, and that's good. It really is. And it's just, not something that you necessarily always think about. And so I caught myself, kind of realizing that fact, here this weekend or this few weekends ago when that wedding was. Like I said, it was good to be with my family, stayed with my dad, and got to see my grandmother, and that all was great and wonderful. Got to see a lot of friends, but I also kind of found myself too just not avoiding contact with people, but had different intentions. I don't know. It was just a couple of things just kind of caught me off guard, so to speak, as I was spending time there. But anyway, Travis, if you're listening or watching, and Lauren, congratulations on your wedding, and I'm just so thankful to have been a part of that. It was beautiful. It was down by the river. You had some fall colors. You had the river in the background. Just a sweet setup, and just a great time together. Reception back at a barn that had been remodeled and set up, and it was just a great setting for what took place. And I was just so happy to be a part of that. So that was great to be a part of that wedding celebration. This last weekend, the church that I'm now serving at, we celebrated our 100-year anniversary, and that was kind of a fun thing to be a part of and to plan. It was crazy hectic. There's just a lot of details, and I am not necessarily a detailed person in how I plan and prepare. I need people around me that can help me accomplish that. And so I was so thankful to have so many involved in getting those things taken care of. And so we had a Saturday night picnic at the park, and it was a little bit of a potluck as well. And then we had our Sunday celebration as well. And so we invited and tried to get in contact with as many former pastors that had served here before me, other families that were big parts of what had taken place here over the last several years. Just really try to make it a great event and to commemorate the things that God had been faithful in, the way that God had molded and shaped lives and had done things here that we needed to remember. And it was kind of an interesting thing. What was on my heart, especially on the Sunday morning service, was to honor the past, but to also look to the future as well. The people in the past were looking to the future and planning for the future. And so I just wanted to communicate that throughout my portion of the message. And it was a great service. We have a Spanish congregation that meets earlier in the day typically, but we did a blended service. And so we did several worship songs that were English and Spanish. All of the stories that were shared, we translated, and we have a lady in our congregation. She just did a fantastic job in doing that. And it was just, it was just such a great service. We have some booklets that were made for the church's 70th anniversary. And so we had those available as well. And reading through their stories of how the church kind of came to be, how it was founded, events that took place to make the legacy of what the church has now, it was just really encouraging. I read a lot of articles, that talk about church growth and statistics that talk about how the church, there's a lot of churches that are struggling and shutting down and things like that. And for a church to celebrate a 100-year anniversary is a big deal. It's a big milestone. and just wanted to celebrate that, wanted to honor that. And so we went through the service. We honored past pastors, had different stories and letters that were read. And then we had our district superintendent. He was there, and our administrator was there as well. And it was good to hear from them and good to hear their connections to the church and their desire, for the church to succeed going forward as well. And then I just had a brief amount of time to share a couple of things of how we are, as a church, are going to be looking forward to what God is doing. And I'm going to be sharing more of that over the next few weeks, but it was just a great celebration. And then after that, we ate like kings. We had just an awesome potluck, an awesome time of fellowship together, and it was just so good. It was just such a great weekend. So 2 big celebrations that I've been able to be a part of here over the last few weeks, this wedding and this 100-year celebration. And so as part of that 100-year celebration, as we're talking about moving forward and going forward, what this looks like for us as a church, what this looks like for me in ministry. And we hear, and I've been listening to a lot of other podcasts and a lot of other people talk about this new normal that we're in. And I'm fully convinced that that's exactly what it is. We're in a new normal. This isn't going to be the same thing time and again as we've been used to. Things are going to be radically different. And I've been just really kind of thinking through that and trying to figure out what that means for me and for this church at this time, what this new normal looks like, what pivots we need to make. And, in light of the past and looking towards a future, how do those things mesh together? How do we as a congregation now honor the past, but don't let the past necessarily keep us from moving in specific ways as we minister going forward? So I've just been really kind of thinking about that a lot and hearing lots of other people talk about this, and how the church needs to pivot and grow. And I totally agree. Where I'm at is trying to figure out what that looks like. How in my context, pastoring a small church in a rural town, what do we do? How do we pivot? How do we make the changes we need to make to continue to have a growing, thriving church that disciples, that introduces them to Jesus, the gospel, and to disciple them into growing Christians, believers. So those are things I've been wrestling with and trying to understand what this may look like. And I know that the online part of our services needs to be an integral part. I think what the church has been doing is, trying to take their in-person gatherings and recording that and making that for their online presence. And I think that that's okay, but I'm beginning to think that maybe that's something that we need to look at a little bit different. Creating something that is unique for online. And I think podcasting is part of that. I think a different type of videos and those type of things, those need to be a little bit different. It's hard to preach to an in-person gathering and still connect with those that are watching online. All of these are things that we need to be looking at different and treating different and thinking through in a different way. And so those are the kind of things that I've been trying to think through. And I think a lot of this is based on the context of where you serve. And so knowing my context and getting to know my context more, is going to help me figure out the needs of this community and my congregation. And so some of the things that I'm trying to think through, currently our schools are all meeting in person. Our church, we're meeting in person. And in fact, we've started our Sunday school classes back up. Our youth group is meeting in person. And there's been some great momentum in those services and in those times together. Trying to, be mindful of our CDC guidelines and our current local restrictions and things like that. Our services have been really full. Our attendance for youth group has been up. So all of these things are happening, and it's really, really good. And it's a little bit different than what I'm hearing in other places where, attendance is still kind of a big issue for some. And so I don't know, anything specific that we've been doing that we've actually seen growth in our in-person services, that we've seen growth in our youth group service. Our Sunday school has been just really well attended. And so I don't know what's been happening there. It hasn't been anything, that's special in what I'm doing, but I think it's something that God is doing. And so trying to keep my finger on the pulse of that and trying to understand what he's doing is where I find myself. So with a lot of things normal in some respects, as far as there's some in-person gatherings still, other things definitely are not normal. And so, just really thinking through some of those things as far as how our church can reach others in a different way. How does this online part work? What do we do to utilize that, to capitalize on it? What are some things we can do different? So just trying to think through those things. I know that, with when COVID first started, we had all these shutdowns take place. We just, our church included, to try to get online, scrambled to try and get services in front of people. And we had initially some great response to that. I think now we need to be thinking through some things a little bit different. As I look back to when we were quarantined, I realized is that that we needed to really change and address in a different way. Making a bigger push now to develop some small groups and some small group leaders. That's one area of focus that we're going to be working on, so that when we or if we have to shut down again, that we can pivot in a way that allows people to still gather in small groups, have these small groups that are in place that can engage our congregation a little bit better. So really trying to think through those things a little bit. Being able to provide help and resources to parents. That was one thing that I heard a lot was parents just feeling like they're struggling in trying to teach their kids and have the right things in place and strategies. So, what are ways that the church can answer that? What are ways that the church can come alongside the parents, support them, and encourage them? How can we as a church work with teachers and the schools? What are ways that we can to come alongside and support and encourage them? Can the church provide some things that would help that? So those are things that I'm thinking about, should we revert back? But I think in the here and now, and as we continue to navigate where we currently are, what are strategies we can make? And so I'd be curious to hear from you that are listening or watching, ideas. I think the church needs to be one that that can lead, that can respond to things that are happening around us, And I think we're in a unique position to do those things, to provide those solutions or help or support. So yeah, those are some of the things that that I'm thinking and trying to figure out. I think, as you look through Scripture, especially through the book of Acts, the fellowship of the believers was such an important part of what they did. The way that they gathered, the way that they ate together, the way that they engaged one another. That's got to be a continued part of what the church is and what the church looks like. But how does that look now? How does that look with the way things are currently? Can we navigate these things in a way that continues to build the kingdom? I wish I had some of the answers to that, and these are things I've been praying about, that God would give me direction in this way. What do we do, and how do we do that? So yeah, those are some of the things been happening in my life and in this season of ministry I find myself in. It's been good to celebrate. It's been good to be a part of those things. And now, the hard work of ministry continues on. How do we continue this? How do we move forward? How do we strategically move forward? And I think that that's an important question that we need to ask as a church, as a community, and how the church looks and functions in the community in the way that it is now. I just want to say thanks for tuning in and listening to this. This podcast, as I've shared before, is just a way for me to process some of these things that I find myself in and what's going on in my life and ministry. But, ministry does not happen inside of a vacuum. It happens in the way that we interact and fellowship with one another. And so the way that this podcast works, I would just love to hear your thoughts and feelings on some of these things, to get your input. I would love to talk about them more in this format. So if you have some of those things, some of those thoughts, questions, ideas, get a hold of me. You can make comments here on Facebook, on YouTube, and on my podcast site. So my email address is pastorbenbeckner@gmail.com. And so you can email me there, and I would love to hear from you. If you could also subscribe, if you're watching there on Facebook, or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Those really help in getting this in front of other people. If you find this helpful and useful, share it with others. Let other people know what's happening. I sure would love it. And I'm looking for more ideas on other podcast episodes, those I can maybe interview that can help me or help all of us as we continue to minister in this season of life. I think one last thing that I want to share with you is, before I close this episode off, is we need to continue to look at this season of life and ministry as opportunity. I've found myself at different times longing for the way that things used to be. But, time marches on, things change, things happen. And how can we look at what's happening now as an opportunity, as a way to advance the kingdom, as a way to engage people in a different way than what the church has done before? How we can be ambassadors of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That has got to be at the foremost of what all we do. And so, anyway, just want to leave you with that. I appreciate you, again, watching, tuning in, listening, wherever you find this. Share it with somebody. You, God bless.